Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're jumping straight into the fascinating, high-stakes detective work behind homeopathic pathogenetic trials. We are going to explore exactly how practitioners manage to separate pure, valuable clinical evidence from everyday background noise, and how they do it without ever compromising the safety of their participants. It's this incredibly intricate dance between rigorous observation and absolute clinical care. So let's get into it. Here's our roadmap for today's investigation. We'll be moving through the reliable symptom chronology, classifying the evidence, the 8 dimensions of symptoms, the art of neutrality, and we'll wrap up with enforcing safety stopping rules. All right, starting off with Section 1, the reliable symptom chronology, establishing the order of events. To really understand how this works, we have to tackle a fundamental law of observation laid out in Dr. Samuel Hahnemann's Aphorism 130, the law of succession. Basically, before building a finalized portrait of a remedy, we have to nail down 6 chronological anchors. We start with the completely unmedicated baseline status. Then, we log the exact exposure time at hour 0. From there, it's all about tracking. We measure the latency of symptom onset, pinpoint the peak intensity, see how it fluctuates based on the time of day, right down to its final resolution. Securing these anchors is absolutely crucial. It ensures our data isn't just a blurred mess of overlapping or repeated doses. And the golden rule here? Contemporaneous, near real-time records will always outperform trying to remember what happened after the fact. Let's be honest, human memory is just incredibly flawed. Most of us can't even remember what we had for breakfast on Tuesday, right? Retrospective recall tends to compress the timeline, completely overemphasize those dramatic peak symptoms, and totally miss the subtle, ordinary changes. We literally need data captured while it is still fresh in the participant's consciousness. Moving on to Section 2, classifying the evidence. This is all about separating true pathogenesis from the noise. Before we even try to interpret what a symptom means therapeutically, every single report has to be rigidly sorted against the participant's baseline diary. We have to ask some tough questions. Is this a brand new phenomenon? Is it just a modified trait of something they already had? Or is it literally just habitual noise that happens to them regularly anyway? If the documentation is incomplete or there are outside factors muddying the waters, it gets strictly isolated as unaccessible. This kind of rigid discipline is exactly what prevents us from creating a completely false clinical picture. Now, there's a really fascinating distinction made in Aphorism 138 between a recurrent old symptom and a persistent symptom. A recurrent symptom is basically a past pathology that completely vanished for a meaningful chunk of time. We're talking months or even years. And then suddenly, boom, it reawakens from the past right after taking the medicine. That is considered a true drug effect. On the flip side, a persistently annoying baseline symptom that just never went away in the first place, that's just background physiological noise. And for the sake of the trial, it must be completely ignored. All right, Section 3. 8 dimensions of symptoms, completing the clinical picture. Here's the thing. A vague complaint simply isn't enough to be therapeutically usable. If a patient just says, "My head hurts," you need way more to go on. To transform a vague report into a complete symptom under Aphorism 133, the clinical sleuth defines it across 8 highly precise dimensions. We need to capture the exact anatomical location, the specific qualitative sensation, and the exact triggers that make it better or worse. By mapping the onset, the duration, any concomitant symptoms happening at the same time, and the actual functional impact on their daily life, well then the symptom finally becomes a complete, highly usable tool. Let's dive into Section 4, the art of neutrality, clarifying without contaminating. Gathering this incredibly rich data requires a lot of caution. It is almost too easy to accidentally plant a suggestion in a participant's mind. As an investigator, you gotta police your interviewing techniques, utilizing neutral prompts, things like describe what you noticed, or what happened next. That gathers untampered evidence. But if you start asking leading, suggestive questions like, was it a stitching pain? You completely taint the investigation with bias. We have to clarify the report without actively creating the symptom for them. Which brings us to the absolute golden rule of data integrity here, the verbatim preservation rule. You must never, ever erase the participant's original, raw descriptive wording. Even when you have to code these symptoms later into standardized fields, you absolutely have to maintain a visible audit trail right back to the volunteer's exact words. This is the only way future reviewers can judge the evidence for themselves, instead of just inheriting a subjective, unexplained conclusion. So we've talked a lot about gathering this pristine data. But that brings up a pretty intense narrative cliffhanger and a vital question. What happens when the emergence of these detailed symptoms crosses the line and actually becomes physically dangerous for the volunteer? And that leads us perfectly into Section 5, enforcing safety stopping rules, participant protection over curiosity. This is exactly where the duty of the investigator makes a dramatic shift, from methodically gathering data to prioritizing human care above all else. Hahnemann himself explicitly warns us in Aphorism 137 against the reckless pursuit of data. Completeness emerges from synthesizing multiple, independent, disciplined trials across diverse people, not from pushing one heroic participant to their absolute physical limits. Once clear or concerning symptoms show up, pushing for excessive doses just adds toxic risk. It doesn't yield true scientific thoroughness. To enforce this protective philosophy in the real world, modern protocols rely on a really smart, dual-layer defense system. First, you have individual stopping rules, like if there's a significant new symptom or even just a participant's request to withdraw. That immediately halts dosing for that specific person. But we contrast this with study-wide rules. So if there are unexpected patterns of toxicity across the whole cohort, or say a product contamination, that acts as a mandatory trigger to immediately suspend the entire trial for everyone. If a severe crisis actually hits, say a participant develops a widespread painful rash after a third dose, this rapid 4-step action pathway kicks in instantly. Step 1, stop all further medicinal exposure immediately. Step 2, assess the clinical severity and any medical red flags. Step 3, provide or arrange whatever supportive care is necessary. And Step 4, notify the responsible safety and regulatory bodies, because participant protection always overrides the experiment. And look, if things get truly critical, the protocol actually allows the medical safety lead to authorize emergency unblinding. But note this carefully. This is strictly to serve urgent medical care. It is a highly regulated clinical procedure meant to aid in toxicological management. It is never, under any circumstances, utilized just to satisfy the investigator's curiosity about who got the active medicine and who received the placebo. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final, provocative thought to chew on. Can modern clinical research successfully balance the relentless pursuit of pristine symptom data with the absolute sanctity of participant safety? It's a powerful reminder that while our methodologies must be rigorously precise to capture a medicine's true nature, that scientific rigor must forever remain bound by our duty to protect those who volunteer. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive. Keep asking the right questions and keep learning.